was incredible. And I lean more into this than anything else right now in the field, and that was that they are the butterfly form of us. We are the larva form of them. And so this gets back to the idea of the mutated ghost, right? Consciousness that has evolved after death and into something that would be alien to us. What's more alien to us than the afterlife?
I'm here now with a guy called Nathaniel Gillis. And I first came across Nathaniel Gillis on a podcast called The Unexplained. And I found him very interesting. His insights were very unique and very interesting. And I'm glad to have him on the show now, or on my podcast, if you want to call it that. So, Natalia, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I want to thank you, Michael, for having me on, and hello to all of the viewers. And if you are already subscribed to his channel, subscribe and like and comment on his stuff. He's a great guy. So for those who are unfamiliar with who I am, my name is Nathaniel Gillis, and I'm from Dayton, Ohio. I first encountered the phenomenon, or whatever we're going to be discussing today, when I was a very young boy. And so I grew up in a haunted house. I grew up next to some paranormal phenomenon. And that led me into my field, into studying religious demonology through an ancient lens and trying to compare and contrast it to modernity. So that's who I am, that's where I come from, and that's what I do.
Okay, what's your view, Nathaniel, about the scientific community's idea on your subject?
Well, I think that they're even more dogmatic than the religious zealots that they accuse me and my friends of being. They limit themselves to the scientific method, which I do appreciate and I value, but not to the degree that we dismiss what the data does suggest, and that is that we are being haunted by something wholly other, as Rudolf Otto would call it, completely alien to us. And so, I have parapsychologist friends of mine, Dr. Barry Fitzgerald, Steve Mera, and and comparing notes. I mean, as long as we can come together and have a meaningful conversation and dialogue without, castigating the other side, I think it's meaningful and I think it's beneficial to the field. But I can tell you this, the leading parapsychologists are saying the same thing, and that is that their data, scientifically speaking, is backing up what we've known for a long time. This phenomenon exists, it's real, we can document it, we can monitor it, but now even this is fascinating to me. If you ask them what they're trying to do now, they're trying to classify these beings. They're trying to quantify them, more so than just trying to record them on cameras and EVPs and on their meters. But what's their pathology? What's their sexual pathology? What's their victimology? And that's really where we're at in the field. It doesn't matter if we're parapsychologists or if we're demonologists. At this point, we're both trying to get the same data. And I call it seeing behind the veil. That's really what we're trying to do.
And what would be the most compelling evidence for this, apart from the classifications? Could you tell us a few of the classifications?
Yeah. So, well, right now, I believe that the phenomenon is wearing different masks. It has throughout history. And it's highly possible that it has constructed entire religions to hide behind, and to where, it'll demonstrate power, it'll manifest as an authority figure. And at the end of the day, what we've done is we've kind of classified them as demonic or alien. And my suggestion is, what if they're neither those? And what if there is something even darker lurking in the distance? So right now, what we're trying to do is look for pathology. Like I said, victimology. Is there any kind of belief systems that these beings exist in? Do they have any rules that they're following? Now, there is some evidence in demonological literature that these beings do play by rules, but they're not rules that we would even understand. I mean, there was a case study I read in the 16th century, the Debug phenomenon, and I don't want to get you demonetized, but I'm just going to skirt around this real quick, where there was an entity that was trying to attack a woman, and the woman was a virgin, and so he wasn't allowed to touch her. But the night of her, her wedding, and then she went on the honeymoon. When they consummated the marriage, that night the entity stalked and assaulted her in her sleep. And the next day, being possessed, the family took her to the exorcist. And the exorcist, according to the Kabbalistic tradition, began to interview the entity. And the entity confessed. Of course, there's rules that we follow. That's what I'm after, right? Forget all the dogmatism and all the fanfare and TV shows. What are they following? And so the entity said that, well, I wasn't allowed to touch her until she was, consummated. And now that she's no longer a virgin, now we are allowed to do things to her. So it does share insight to their worldview. But that's not to suggest that other beings don't follow different rules, right? And so I think that demonology's failed us in the sense that they've classified them according to the dominating religious system, which right now would be Catholicism. But I don't want to ramble, but that's what we're after. What we're looking for is, okay, what are the bloody footprints in the sand or in the snow, and trying to classify them according to their beliefs. So not if you project ours.
So if you don't think it's demonic or alien, and if you think it's something that's darker, what would you think it was?
Well, I think that when we try to use the term demon, I think that it's a loaded term. I think it's a lot of Greek mythology built into it, and so that's why my research has been centered around what was a demon before we used the Greek term daemon. What was this? An unclean spirit?
Daemon, no?
Yeah, it's an unclean spirit according to Mesopotamia, and even more than that, it was mutated consciousness, where it was not just a ghost. It wasn't just consciousness that existed in a liminal state in between two worlds, but it was an entity that had mutated, and in its mutation, it carried its own belief system with it into that next dimension. However, it still had its natural lusts. And if it was an evil person, it carried that into the afterlife, which we do have evidence of that. But there is enough evidence that I think that and if you guys don't know me, look me up on YouTube, you'll see my lectures. But there's a profound amount of evidence, sir, that there are entities that are seemingly recruiting people in life, just so that when they die, they'll have knowledge of who to go to, and they're being taught even now. That's a whole nother show. But yeah, so getting back to the idea that
could you give an example of that? That's I've never
heard 100%. Yeah. So if you go into this experiencer phenomenon, forgive me, I have a show right after this, so I have to drink up some energy.
Sure.
Yeah, so if we look at the experiencer phenomenon, in the modernity, with people getting abducted by UFOs and all of this stuff, there's a great deal of them who are being taught how to fly craft, and taught all kinds of things, experiences, doctrines, even. The whole problem is they're being taught all of this out of body. Like Betty Luca, for instance, she's abducted. The beings take her consciousness out of her body. She's experiencing everything in real time, just as if she would embodied. They teach her how to fly the craft and everything. And then they tell her, you probably won't remember this once we put you back into your body. Now, the reason this is so fascinating, the reason I bring this up even, and not to waste our time here, but they were not teaching her muscle memory. They were teaching her how to fly a craft out of body. And so we have a host of different experiences just like this, who are seemingly being trained and recruited, not for it being embodied, but being prepared for the afterlife, which is quite troubling, because we would call these dream demons and soul hunters in demonology. But I think this shows us that there is another comparison, it's not a contrast, but these are interconnectivities between both studies of research. And it suggests that the same phenomenon is behind both manifestations. It's just allowing us to believe that they're different phenomena. And thus, it's separate. It's behind both puppets, working them against each other. So the interconnected activities are obvious. They get more plain with each level of research you do. But me and my colleagues, we've basically come to that conclusion that that there is something significant occurring, and we are being invaded by the impossible.
When you say it's like they're preparing us for the afterlife or preparing certain
Yeah.
individuals, it reminds me of what Whitley Strieber said about the whole alien phenomena, that it's actually got a lot to do with people who have died or something to
Oh
that
yeah.
effect. So does your view, is it similar to that, or do they overlap?
Yes. Yeah, I lean towards his point, and also a guy named Ray Fowler. He's dead now, God rest his soul. But Ray Fowler had the hypothesis that was incredible. And I lean more into this than anything else right now in the field, and that was that they are the butterfly form of us. We are the larva form of them. And so this gets back to the idea of the mutated ghost, right? Consciousness that has evolved after death and into something that would be alien to us. What's more alien to us than the afterlife?
Yeah, yeah. Sure, but when you say it's dark, is there another version where there's a light
Yes,
part, or
absolutely. Well, in terms of, is there a light aspect of it?
Mhm.
Well, I think that when we look at what they're doing, and this is, I've been talking to different people, especially that are more connected to the ufology field lately. But what they're doing is these beings are seemingly recruiting people according to their abilities. It's the same thing with our government. Our government, at one stage in their research, they were seeking UFOs. Once they got that underneath their belt, they realized that there's something darker and deeper at work. Now they're seeking people who can see UFOs. Think about that, because the
It's like
phenomenon is testing them.
it was like what you were saying before, the Collins elite.
Right. Yes, yes. And so there is an esoteric value here. I was on like a date show the other night, and I said, I grew up in Christianity, specifically a sect called Pentecostalism, very stringent, strict. I couldn't wear shorts. My mom couldn't cut her hair. But every now and then, we would have people that would come in and preach at the local church who were just insanely gifted. And I'm not talking about something we would see on TBN, or I'm going to throw my jacket at you and you're going to pass out. I'm talking about people who would hide up in mountaintops for weeks and come down and do miracles. And you would almost fall on your face when you got near them. And so, but here's the issue: you can line up 10 different ministers. They could fast for the same days. They could recite the same incantations, but only 3 or 4 of them out of the 10 would have any kind of contact with divinity. Vice versa, this phenomenon, again, it's seeking people. It's almost like they're recruiting individuals and testing their abilities to perceive the phenomenon itself. And I think, and here's what's fascinating, we call them experiencers, right? And what are they doing? They're testing them. So the darker aspects of the phenomenon is that they are holding people captive. Many experiencers have committed suicide. There are accounts that I know personally, people that I've worked with who've been threatened by them. If you do not do what we say when we want you to say it, we will kill you. Or when they have a near-death experience, these are the beings that they meet. It's not dear Aunt Edna, right? It's the phenomenon mask. In some cases, it masks itself. And then it'll say that, and this is in the book Beyond UFOs, hey, your doctors cannot repair your body. You're going to die unless you become our prophet and you do what we want you to do. And so there is a darker aspect of it where they use our human condition against us and bend our will, and they manufacture consent within us to do what they want us to do, which is pretty terrifying. And I'll shut up, man. I promise.
Well, no, you're doing. I'm giving away to you. You're doing great. When you say, what is their end goal, Nathaniel? In your opinion, what is their end goal? What is their ultimate objective?
I don't know. I really don't. And I think that we're seeing bits and pieces of the phenomenon. And the reason I don't know what their goal is because we cannot decipher rather between what is propaganda something that they're using to propagandize us with, or if it's something that's really occurring. When you're dealing with even in demonic possessions, you could be dealing with an entity that's just lying to you the entire time, and you can't trust it. And I'm going to say this: it'll lie to you with the truth. In other words, Paulino he was given a lecture on possession and abduction, and he was talking about how he was in seminary, and he was in the middle of an exorcism with his priests and his professors, and he thought in his mind, he didn't even utter it, he just thought, this is nonsense and I don't believe it. Instantly, the entity snapped to attention, looked at him and spoke in perfect Malay, and said in no uncertain terms, I was there when your father killed himself and I made him pull the trigger. Now, that's
crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a sadistic thing to say to a kid. And so, but here's the problem. Did he tell the truth in that his father killed himself? 100%, undeniable. But does that mean he was telling the truth when he said he made him do it? We don't know. Right, so it can be demonstrating knowledge, preternatural knowledge, and use that as a way to, hurt us or even lie to us about their abilities. We don't really know. And at this point, we don't even know if NDE research is what it should be. We don't know. So there's various factions within the phenomena where it layers itself in deception. And right now, we're just trying to go through it all and rehash even old cases throughout history and say, okay, we have new data. Let's compare it to what we know now. And hopefully we can get a better understanding of what's really going on.
Would you categorize it in terms of the natural or the supernatural, or is it just the
supernatural? I think it's very much supernatural. I do not believe in the ET hypothesis. I think that Succubi nailed that the coffin at one point when the Collins elite sat down at her cottage before she moved to LA and said, okay, listen, you've talked to Crowley, you've performed rituals with Crowley, can you go into a session of channeling in front of us and contact the beings that Crowley had contacted? She goes, I don't know that I can, but I'm going to do my best. And then she goes into the trance. And they asked her, these are people from the Department of Defense. These aren't just, that the quarter preacher, which there's nothing wrong with that. Because I mean, they're more prolific than that. And so, are you these beings? Yes, we are. Are you extraterrestrial? Ha 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 ha. And they poked fun at them. Of course we're not. Don't you know that's just our latest mask? It's the latest deception, which I lean into. But I think that in order for us to understand that, we have to get rid of the demon and the alien combined, take all the case studies, all the data we've collected, anything we can learn, put it aside and say, okay, let's go deep into this. Are these demons according to the first century? No, they're not. They're doing demonic things, but I don't, and we're going to get to Sinistrari and Masters later on, but what they're doing has been experienced by the demonic, but I mean, it's far more sinister. I mean, if you go into Catholicism, a demon is just a being that wants to destroy the image of God. It wants to kill, pillage, rape, murder, all that. That's not what these beings are doing. They're using us like cattle. We'll keep you alive. We'll use, anyways.
How much of religion do you think has got it right? What percentage of the phenomenon do you think it's got? Like if you were, like you just mentioned Catholicism, what percentage do you think Catholicism has on it, like their understanding?
Well, I don't think they have. I think they have certain aspects of it right in terms of, okay, I shouldn't even say that. They are great at chronicling the phenomenon. In terms of documentation, absolutely. But in terms of defining its origin, defining its belief systems, no. No different than the Kabbalistic tradition in the 16th century. They have aspects of it right. There were women being inseminated by these beings. I mean, it's the missing fetus syndrome, right? They were experiencing this phenomenon. But what we've done is we've interpreted an ancient phenomenon and missing fetus syndrome, right? That's our modern interpretation of an ancient phenomenon. Now, here's what's so unique, and this is just me picking pepper out of the, you know, just because the old theory was wrong doesn't mean the new theory is right.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the litmus test in the field. Well, that's wrong. This must be right. What if they're both wrong? And what if what we've done is now we're starting to see enough of the pieces of the puzzle to realize that these beings have been playing roles and archetypes, hiding behind veils, and working us in what, and this is so interesting too, just as long, and it's not as if they want all religions to be one. No, they want them to be segregated to the point that dogmatism rules the day. This is what I mean. When I deal with ufologists and parapsychologists, you'll have an experiencer that a parapsychologist is working with, and then that parapsychologist will say, I don't want you to talk to the demonologist about what you're going through. I'll help you out. So then that person that was experiencing everything. Meanwhile, I'm on the phone with a lady who's experiencing everything that individual is. Now, what's happened is we're both studying the same phenomenon from different aspects of it. But the real secret is we've got to get these experiencers together at the same time. Because I promise you, what we'll realize is something that's going to be uncomfortable is that we need all hands on deck. It's not me versus them. These people are experiencing the same things. They're using different terms. The markings on their bodies are the same, right? The reproductive issues are the same. The fertility monitoring, the rapes, the soul abduction, all of this, it's the same phenomenon, and it's compartmentalized itself. And it's allowed us to follow in that dogma where, hey, I don't want anything to do with that. I believe it's this. And I think that that's what I'm trying to harp on now, which has been uncomfortable within demonologists. Because they don't, and here's where it's at, they don't know enough about parapsychology to go into that area. They're still trying to be on television. They're trying to be on all these different shows. And I'm not a part of that crew. I couldn't care less.
What protection do you think would be appropriate for protecting yourself against this phenomenon?
Well,
is there even any protection?
Let's go through their campaigns. I'll do two different case studies, okay? And because again, I'm operating under the umbrella of the phenomenon being the same, but using different aspects of it to hide behind. So saying that hauntology and ufology are the same, just different arms of the same beasts. But yeah, so Carmen Snedeker in The Haunting in Connecticut, her son was he was stricken with cancer, and they had moved into an old mortuary. Really bad scene. I mean, it was basically food to these beings. So they get into this house, and they hear footsteps, doors open and shutting without people doing it themselves, shadow figures, orbs, disembodied voices. The son was waking up in the middle of the night, and a voice from downstairs in the basement is calling his name, come down here with us. Just stuff that's horrifying. Well, she had placed a crucifix on top of a door jamb. And here's why she did that, because the priest had told her, if you put that up there, the entity will not be allowed to go into the room. And so there for a while, the entity allowed them to believe that case because it stayed in all the other rooms, but that one. So it's establishing we can have faith in this. Then the next day, she wakes up, is cleaning the house, and goes over to that door, and there's the crucifix laying on the ground. Now the entity's in the room. So that rule was broken. Let's go on. A case in ufology. There was an experiencer that I worked with where she was laying in bed at night. She had been abducted since her youth. Next thing you know, there's these bright lights shining in her house. And one of the lights hit the crucifix over her bed, and it dislodged the crucifix. And it's pulling the crucifix off the wall. It's the ground. Now, Catholicism would say that can't possibly be a demon because a demon does not have that power. But then in religious philosophy, we would have to suggest that you mean there's something darker than a demon? What are we seeing here? Whatever we're dealing with at this point, it's playing by its own rules. And to this day, we don't know what rules they are. We know they're not playing by our rules. In Beyond UFOs, I read an account where a lady was literally in prayer. Jesus, save me. Please save me. Please, God, don't let him take me again. And in mid-sentence, her eyes rolled back in her head. She's gone. I read that account. Michael, I clocked out, man. I promise you. It was about 2 years ago. I canceled all my shows. I told my parents I got to go. I flew out to Rhode Island. It scared me because, again, they're transcending every microcosm. Now, one thing that has been agreed on is iron. They don't like iron. And so when people ask me the questions you're asking, okay, employ any religious amulet you find, anything you believe in at this point, but also put iron. I don't care if it's an iron cross, anything iron. That's one thing that's seemingly unanimously agreed on. But again, we don't really know. I mean, their victimology is their victimology. Now, their victimology is very similar to what we would consider to be a generational spirit, where it maps out the bloodline of a family, and then it will abduct certain people from that bloodline the more they produce. So, but we don't know why.
Yeah,
so
the reason I asked that is because in my 20s, I had a few problems with addiction and various things. I wouldn't have been a very religious person, and I wouldn't consider myself a religious person today even, but I do believe in Christ. And I wouldn't have believed in Christ in my 20s, even my early 30s. But there came a time in my mid-30s where I was going through a crisis point, and I used to suffer a lot from sleep paralysis and various other things. But when I got down one night and I'm not trying to convert anybody here or anything. I'm just telling you what happened to me. But one night I got down on my knees and I said a prayer, and I asked Jesus to come into. I said, if you're real, come into my life. And ever since then, I've never experienced anything. No sleep paralysis, none of those negative, heavy feelings. Of course, you have bad days and whatnot, but
nothing like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me, that was kind of like proof. So I don't what would you say about that? How would you comment on that?
I think there's quite a lot of evidence of that occurring. I mean, even my own account when I was growing up, I mean, shadow figures. I'd wake up and I'd hear disembodied voice. It's just a lot of what Carmen Snedeker's family went through, but I went through it by myself. I used the name Jesus. I crawled up in a fetal position in my room, and I had lost weight. I had stopped eating, stopped going to school. I was failing my classes. It was just a nightmare. And I said, God, Jesus, I don't know. I was going to church, but I said, I don't know what to do anymore. I can't keep doing what I'm doing. It's not working. And there was deliverance there. Now, what's really interesting, though, is when we get into case studies of abduction, I had one lady who was in the middle of the abduction and she called on Jesus. And here's something that's apocalyptic. Oh, we believe in Jesus too. Matter of fact, here he comes. And Jesus manifested. Now, and then just Jesus held his hand out like this and said, all seed, not all souls, but all seed is mine and it belongs to me. And she said that from that point, she was used as a hybrid mother. But here's the key. Most of her babies died in the womb.
Shit.
So okay, let's go back down this before I forget these other case studies. So there was one lady I read about who she called on Jesus and Jesus manifested to her, but he wasn't the olive skin Jewish Nazareth version of Jesus, which is historical. It was something that they had plucked out of her mind. It was the Swedish Presbyterian version of whatever she believed Jesus to be. And so this gets into the phenomena where it will mimic belief systems, but it'll also mimic images that you have of deities. It doesn't matter if they're historical. Why? Because it's deception. They don't have to be historical. Now, if you'd have done that to Michael Heiser, the late Michael Heiser, the Hebrew scholar, you better have it right. You know what I mean, buddy? You better have it right, because Michael would call the bluff. That ain't Jesus.
Can you say that? Did Michael Heiser die?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I didn't know. Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, he had cancer and it's bad. But yeah, so they're not but they're measuring intellect. This is fascinating. They're measuring knowledge and literacy. They can pluck a memory out of the mind and play the role and role play you into that, back to that memory. I was dealing with a lady in India who was encountering an Incubi entity or an Incubi program. And she said the being had manifested to her in the image of every man she had been intimate with. Here's what's fascinating, starting with the men that did not have to wear protection. So what it was doing, it was not after pleasure, because that's what early demonologists like Sinistrari was after. It was just pleasure? No, it was also insemination. And so, but what it was doing was, it was suggesting, I am the man you were intimate with. Okay, and knowing that you did not make him wear protection, you're not going to make me wear protection again, are you? No, why? Because it's increasing the probability of insemination. So literally working her like a safe, just, and so it came to her 7 different times, and she just kept putting a wall up. So I had a case study. I was doing a Jeff Kingsbury show, and a lady reached out to me and was like, listen, I know your work. I want to talk to you about what happened to me the other day. So, okay. She's in bed, and she goes into a dream state, and her husband walks up to the side of the bed, and next thing you know, they're intimate. When everything is said and done, she said she just started, like, her brain fog started lifting, and she's looking at her husband who's standing next to her, and he grins at her. And when he grinned, she noticed that there were certain things with his teeth that did not match her husband. And then all of a sudden she realized, and and then it just kind of laughed, and it dissolved into a smoky apparition. That's what she realized. Her husband had been next to her asleep the entire time. What are we dealing with here?
So when she went into this state, was it like a lucid dream, or was it a dream state, or was it actually in real time?
It's a mixture of both, all 3 of them. Yeah, it's a dream state, but it's a program that's designed to be real, feel real, and not to get too dark, but to even be more fulfilling than the real event itself. Where, you know, there's a drawing back to that moment. I want to have that again. And so that's where these beings will, you know, they'll create that in people. And there's cases of history like that all the time. But the problem is, it gets back into this idea of where they will role play with us. And in my book, The Skin That Crawls, I talk about the temptation of belief that comes along with it. It's not enough for me just to manifest to you as an ex-lover. Do you believe I am that ex-lover? Like, even if it was just a dream, do you believe it? Oh, okay. Okay, then we're gonna have to fulfill the role. You know what you did with that guy, right? And so it's just it's deception through and through.
So even though our will might necessarily be limited in a way, our belief system almost is more important to these beings than our willingness to accept some.
Perfectly put. I agree. And so that's that again. It's not okay. When we get down to the philosophy of it, it's not just I'm appearing to you as Jesus, but what do you believe? Right? Do you believe? But so belief is that plays that role in it. So yeah, it masks itself, and I don't know at this point. I don't know of any rules that they follow. I did a lecture on Leap Project. I don't know if you watched it. Who's conjuring who? Talking about CE5 and how these people out there trying to conjure the phenomenon. If you go through John Dee and Edward Kelly, it was almost like the being that they conjured had conjured them, but it needed a mortal portal, somebody to invite them. Do an incantation for me.
That was the Enochian language.
Yes, absolutely. And the alleged handmaiden that had changed her entire existence once they swapped wives and did whatever these beings wanted them to do. So again, even with Aleister Crowley, he didn't conjure ET. Never even implied that. Neither did Lamb or Iron. None of that was even implied. With Jack Parsons, the great Rocketeer, what are we really doing here? And so, but getting back to the rules they follow in early demonological works, we thought we had some semblance of control over them, right? In other words, you would go into a haunted house. If I do this, if I say this, the being's going to have to respond in one of a handful of ways and all of that. And what happened was the Catholic Church, for the longest time, they had kind of created a monopoly on case studies and began to doctor data. And so in the 16th century, it came to a beachhead because you had Isaac Lurie and other teachers in Prague and in Israel teaching on, okay, not all of these are fallen angels. Some of these are ghosts. Some of these are just disincarnate beings. But Catholicism was trying to solidify power amongst the ranks. And so they began to doctor the data. And what they started out was saying, okay, they're all fallen angels. And they all obey the holy water. And they all obey our scriptures. And then they started to slip up in their nuances. And well, why do we use holy water? Well, because it reminds them of baptism. Well, angels weren't baptized. The baptism was designed for human beings. So that's what kind of broke the ice for me. I thought, what a hot moment here. So, but neither of them, again, they were trying to consolidate power. And so my point, though, is even if you get into demonology, we have a lot of doctored data from Catholicism. And the reality is there's a lot of case studies where these beings showed pathology, victimology, sexual pathology that did not fit the blueprint of horns and hooves. And so it was just dismissed.
Yeah, okay. So if I was talking to you earlier about R.E.L. Masters' book Eros and Evil, the sexual psychopathology of witchcraft. Now I know you referenced that book a few times. What do you think of this book, Nathaniel? What do you think of that book? I read it, and when I read it, I thought it was very good. I thought it was
I loved it.
I thought it was very good. What
man, I've read it so many times. I have different colors of highlighter, different colors of pens. Yeah. I think Masters is incredible. I think he's an incredible archivist. I think his documentation. I don't know of a work right now in which era literature that was as exhaustive as his was. However, I do not like his conclusion. His conclusion was just basically a natural psychology. These are just figments of our imagination, manifestations of perversions within women and men. But it's an old theory. I think that if he would have been in my field and saw that these are real events, that I think that if anybody would have been scared of his own literature, it would have been him, because he would have forced to realize these are not just dreams. They're not phantasms. These are the real events happening to real people. But I think he's incredible. I tried to email him, but when I found his email, I found that he had died, which was another loss.
I think the book came out in 1962. He had another book. He had another book that John Lennon really liked. It wasn't that book, but he had a different. I forget the name of it, but John Lennon spoke highly of it. So when Masters, the conclusion he comes to that this phenomenon. Yeah, but they're aberrations of character, but in a way, it kind of like he's almost proven the point, because if you want to look at it
too much.
So like his conclusion, although he reverts back to psychology and nature, he's really just saying the exact same thing, that it's just in a different way, that these things are happening. They're phenomena that is occurring.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I remember underlining his last conclusion to it when he summed it all up, and I went, wait. I mean, because once you read it, and for those who are going to read the book, I mean, it's expensive. I think I don't know how much I paid for it, but it's more of one of the more expensive books out there. It's just incredible. I love his work.
How does it inform your own work? How does it
well,
act as a guide
again,
to your own?
for someone who's looking for behavioral patterns, right? Not just for names of demons, which I think I went through that as a young person. Oh, these are the names. That must be who they are. No, these are just manifestations that people try to classify them as. If anything, it gave me insight into the modern UFO abduction phenomenon. I think there's a passage in there, if you remember, it changed my whole perception of this. He's talking about how there were witches in bed with their husbands, and the demon would abduct them. It's it's fascinating, and then it would replace their body with a familiar spirit, and so the husband wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks that's my wife, and no, she's with the demon. And then he goes into this number. It's fascinating. He goes into this. He's like, so you have all these witches, and they're performing sexual acts with these demons and corpses, and they're out there sabbats, and then something would happen. It was like a frequency would go in and out. They're performing all these rituals and stuff, and then something would change. And the women would look around and they realized that they were not copulating with corpses. This blew the lid off my entire research right here. They weren't copulating with corpses. And matter of fact, that's not even a demon that they're having intercourse with. They were being poked and prodded by metallic objects. That's the modern UFO abduction.
Yeah.
Taking over and inseminating. But what's so fascinating about Masters, and he captures this so eloquently. I wish he would have studied ufology. He would have been, lights out. But he captures it in such a way where it's impossible for us to come to a different conclusion. That yes, we have 100 accounts of these women thinking they're doing all of that. It's recorded in history. But we have like a dozen accounts of people who thought they were going through all that, but it was a theatrical production designed to deceive the experiencer, designed to give them over to consensual relationship, right? Because the witch believed in the demon they were having intercourse with. So I'm going to be the demon. And then it's the corpse, right? It's necrophilia. So, but the phenomenon allowed them to believe that, and then actually manifested according to that belief system. And then somehow, and I think it was their technology failed them for a fleeting moment or something, but the women finally looked around and they realized, oh man, it's a theatrical production tailored to me and my experience. And if you take that, we've already talked about it tonight in the show. If you take that to what these experiences are having in these abductions, the exact same thing. I believe in Jesus. Da, 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 da. Here's a theatrical production. And yeah, so I love Master's work. I would encourage everybody, now don't read it at nighttime, and you maybe need some, I don't know, bourbon or scotch later on after to just settle the nerves. But he is an incredible guy.
Yeah, it was a good read. Yeah, I think you can pick it up on Kindle now for like €3 or €4. It's you can pick it up there.
Have it
in the appendix of that book, where Ludovico Maria Sinistrari, Sinistrari. Yeah, he's a demonality. What do you think of that? What do you think of that book?
First of all, I thought it was going to be bigger than it was. one half the book is written in his language, the other was translated into English. But Sinistrari was unique. I mean, he's a Franciscan priest, and he's dealing, just like with every man, he's dealing with the phenomenon in his own worldview, doing his best to understand it. One thing that is so incredible when we're dealing, because these two are about copulation, specifically with demons. And when he was dealing with was something so unique, and at least he dealt with the data honestly. He manifested a lot of character And I respect him highly for that. I mean, for instance, he was talking to women who were being accosted by these beings in the middle of the night. And when they were talking to him about, okay, again, it's not just what rules are they playing, but what kind of sin have I committed with them? That is profound, my friend. Doesn't that break your heart? It shatters me into pieces. You've got good people. I don't even know what that was that I was intimate with. What does it fall under? And so he didn't know. Bestiality. I mean, that was one of his answers. But then he came to the conclusion, like, there's no category of sin here because it's so alien to us, right? At least in the Torah and the Ten Commandments, in the Levitical law, we had different things, but we knew how to characterize them because we could quantify them. You know, you can measure what an animal is. It's an animal. You know, it's a dog, or and a corpse. We know what that is. What's this? And so you had genuine conversations that Sinistrari was having with family members and husbands. Marriages falling apart. You know, who did my wife cheat on me with? And so, but what he started doing was he started just poking holes into the narrative that these beings were drawing. Well, it's not a corpse. That would be necrophilia. You know, that's just saying we could, but it was almost suggesting that even the Bible did not prepare us for this kind of invasion, which I'm not suggesting that, but that's what he's drawing us to. And then he also allowed for certain behavioral patterns to emerge, like the woman that he was doing an autopsy on and peeled back her eyelids, and the entity had marked her underneath her eyelids.
Mm-hmm.
Traumatizing stuff that you won't hear in mainstream media. And but I think he was incredible. And but he also kind of he took us by the hand, led us in our own imaginations, specifically to a dirt road one day when he was walking down a dirt road, and he said he encountered a demon, but he didn't know what kind of demon it was. And so you see the cognitive dissonance of him thinking in his own mind, this has got to be a demon, but it's alien to me. And so he goes into his rituals. I think you might remember, because it was rituals. It didn't obey this.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't respond to this. And so he determined it must have been a pagan demon, which is a paradox. So he allowed, I'm sorry.
No.
Get me passionate, man. I love his work.
Yeah, sure. Why do you think he wrote it? Of course, he was under the Catholic Church, and as you said, he was a Franciscan priest. But why do you think he wrote it? What was his goal in writing that?
I don't know. I mean, it wasn't, and I'm going to say this: he wasn't an R.E.L. master. You know, his control and mastery of the English language wasn't anything remotely close to other contemporaries of his. I honestly think he wanted to document experiences. He wanted to point us in the direction of, hey, listen, there are things that even the Catholic Church, the Franciscan Church, that we can't even understand. There's something there, right? And it doesn't. We can't really put a label on it. It's a pagan demon. That's what I think. It's hilarious. What do you mean? See, paganism is defined by the religions it doesn't follow. But it can't be a demon if it doesn't fall under the umbrella of a religious system that defines it as a demon. You understand? It's so contradictory. But I think that's what he was trying to articulate was, hey, come here. Here are my case studies. Here are the families I've worked with. Here are the semen collections that we've had. And first of all, it looks a lot like this is what he said. Remember, they're milking the carcasses of the dead.
Mm-hmm.
We have a significant issue here. This is not table talk for dinner. Maybe at a bar, if you get too drunk, don't talk to anybody else about it. But this needs to be heard. But more than anything else, he held hands with all of the other experiencers and researchers. He gave a voice to the voiceless, to the deceased woman who died with her experience. But certainly he also, and I can go down this rabbit trail for a 5-second whatever, but he starts getting into, okay, the semen that they were collecting that was being left by these beings, they must have not created themselves. It did
So,
not come from them.
so is he saying that they were eternal, that they were?
Yes, yes, that these were the reasons that the Watchers in biblical antiquity were created, to protect the bodies of the recently deceased.